Hey guys, I'm really excited about today's video, and you can see why. That's right, I finally got my hands on a grease gun, also known as an M3, also known as an M3A1. We'll talk about the different variations, but the grease gun, obviously World War II, and I watched these growing up and always thought they were cool, and believe it or not, with all the guns that have come through here, I have never handled a grease gun. Actually, I was a painter in college. Wasn't everybody a painter in college? And I don't think of a grease gun. I think of a caulk gun. You know the caulk gun that you pull it back, put the tube of caulk in it? Anyway, that's what it reminds me of, is the caulk gun. So when I saw it in the movies, I thought, I would love to shoot one of these. Well, the downside is I'm not able to shoot this one because we bought this for a customer, and so it's not my gun. I don't feel comfortable shooting it, but I may get permission from the customer, and if I do, I'll take it out and shoot it. But I wanted to at least show it to you so that no matter what, you at least get to learn a little bit about the M3A1. This is an M3A1 made by Ithaca, by the way. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. And we have a celebrity stand-in, Ian McCullum. We're going to show him shooting one of these from a previous video. So you get the whole 9 yards. You get a little bit of everything. First and foremost, we know from watching the movies that the predecessor to this gun in World War II was the Thompson submachine gun. So I grew up with combat and Vic Morrow, and he always carried that Thompson submachine gun. I thought that was so cool. And then another movie that comes to mind, a lot of movies with Thompsons in them, but Saving Private Ryan, we know that he carried the Thompson. But then an equal number of movies, from time to time, you see them carrying this grease gun. They're both very cool weapons. The one that comes to mind most recently was Hacksaw Ridge. They carried a lot of grease guns in that gun, and actually that's because these were used more at the end of the war, toward 1945. The Thompsons were used earlier in the war. We'll do a little bit of a comparison in history. The reason that these are seen later in the war is because these were first, they did the designs in 1942, and it was actually two engineers from General Motors. They worked with the Inland Corporation, but they whipped this thing together really quickly, like in the matter of a month. The end of 42, the first production was in January of 43, and the early ones were all made by Guide Lamp Corporation, which is a subsidiary of General Motors. Now that factory, what else is it famous for? The Guide Lamp Factory in Anderson, Indiana. If you remember, think about it. Yeah, that's right, the Liberator. The Liberator, which was stamped sheet metal, 45 caliber throwaway weapon. They also made this, 1943, production started. The Guide Lamp Corporation in Indiana. This is all stamped metal. I'm going to come a little closer and show you a little bit what I mean. This side is stamped. So one half of it is stamped. Forget the barrel. Well, that comes right off. That just screws right on, that barrel. But this is stamped steel. Same way with the other side, stamped steel. They put the two sides together and they do a quick weld all the way around. Down here, this is just a piece that covers it, but all the way around is just stamped metal. Now they had, of course, the United States could see that the Germans had the MP40. Germans are known for their ingenuity in making weapons, but I have to tell you, this is ingenious. So kudos to the Germans for their engineering and ingenuity, but kudos to the Americans for their can-do attitude to put this out. You're going to see how cool this is. But even with the MP40, you have Bakelite parts, more moving parts. This is all just steel. This unscrews, the bolt just falls right out. The magazine is really simple. So it's just a really simple design, and I'm going to show you in a little bit how simply this is made. Very few moving parts, very little that can go wrong with it, and just an ingenious weapon. So I already mentioned that the majority of these were made by Guide Lamp, and most of the ones I see in auction, they actually made about 640,000 of these. The earliest ones were just called the M3. But late in the war, 1945, they made a few alterations. The The most obvious alteration was a cocking knob. You can see on the early guide lamps, the M3 had the cocking knob, but that had a few moving parts, and sometimes the knob would get stuck or broken, or would, when you drop it. Also, the rear sight was a little flimsy, and so would bend if you dropped it. So they fortified this, and they did away with the cocking knob. So it no longer cocked like that, but if you handled rising, they have underneath here where you stick your thumb in and pull the bolt back like that. I do have a dummy round in there. Then all you do is pull the trigger, and that drops the bolt and feeds the round. Do it again. You can see how simply that works. So it's just pulling the bolt back. Now the safety on this is, again, engineering geniuses. The safety on that is just close it. So let me cock it. Close this. Doesn't fire anymore because that holds it in place. So you're out in the field and you're ready to fire. You pop it open. You're ready to shoot. It's just really, really simple. Very few moving parts, etc. One of the complaints, and Ian makes this point. This is set for about 100 yards. So the rear sight, with this being all gray, when you go to look through it, it's just a little tiny hole. And he said with all the gray here, it's hard to spot. So the earlier ones, the M3, now I don't know if the factory painted that on, but what I noticed is, and what Ian criticized it for, it's hard to find that gray front sight. And so painted red, I find it right away. And obviously, this is we'll pull this back. This comes all the way back. You can steady it on your shoulder and look through. And if you watch people shooting it, it holds steady on the target. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between the Thompson and the M3, but it's easy to stay steady on the target and can be more accurate. Now, people are going to get upset about that statement, but in certain circumstances, this is more accurate than the Thompson because you can hold it on the target, and the Thompson tends to, because of it's more rapid fire, it tends to raise up. And so this one, in some regards, is more accurate. Let's go ahead and take a look at a Thompson, and I'll explain that further. Okay, it's a good day at Legacy because I do have a Thompson. Now this is a commercial West Hurley made gun, but not military, but it's very similar to what the military used. They did streamline the military version a little bit to get the cost down, but generally when the war started, a Thompson machine gun cost about $200. This, sheet metal stamped together and welded, costs $20. So you can make 10 of these for the same price as one of these. So the soldiers that carried these really liked them, but the soldiers that carried these also like them. And both sides, bam, 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 they fight each other as to which is a better gun. Well, the bottom line is cost. If you're looking at $640,000, we're talking about saving millions and millions of dollars that could have gone for other things like aircraft and tanks. So this is a no-brainer in terms of in wartime, and you're just trying to pop these out. Also, they do it in a fraction of the time. So this was a huge advantage, even though this is a wonderful weapon and a wonderful piece of art. This fires at about 700 rounds per minute to 800 rounds per minute. So 700 to 800 rounds a minute. And the problem with that is because of the rapid fire, it does tend to raise up. Now, funny story, I went to a guy in the area who built in his garage a brand new shooting range. And he invited me over and said, bring a gun or two. We brought over some Lugers and Colts, but we also brought over a Thompson. We said, do you mind if we shoot full auto in your brand new shooting range? And he said, no, go ahead. And he mentioned, this is all brand new, so try to hold it on the target. And he had shot one before. He said, it'll have a tendency to lift up. Don't hit my ceiling. So the first guy that shot it puts it on target and goes right up, hits the ceiling. It looked like it was snowing. All the popcorn ceiling was just coming down. He then gave me a turn, and I saw exactly what he meant. I didn't do as badly, but I could sense that as soon as I shot it, it does raise up because of the speed of the action. it does raise up. Now, those of you who want to criticize me and say, I don't know what I'm doing, you're right. It was the first time I ever shot a Thompson, but it was a good lesson. When I watch people shooting this, I notice that they get a firm grip and they're holding it right on the target. Because of the speed of the fire, it's a lot easier to hold on target. Here's, as promised, here's a video of Ian shooting the M3. Now you'll notice that even the sound, it actually reminds me a little bit of a BAR, which has a heavy bolt. This has a heavy bolt, a slower rate of fire. Here we can see in slow motion, Ian shooting, you can see the action, very simple action. And then finally, one of the other advantages, I mentioned the moving parts, that has select fire for single fire and then full auto. This doesn't have it because the rate of fire is so slow, you can just pull the trigger once and you have single fire. So all those issues, the safety, just pop it up, the bolt, just pop it back, it stays back. The sight is very simple. Single action, you just pull it once. Full auto, you just hold the trigger down. This folds up very nicely. And let me show you another aspect of this collapsible stock. If I take this all the way out, this doesn't look like much, but in fact, this is the cleaning rod. You use this as a cleaning rod, and it's really simple. Actually, when you take the bolt off, well, let me show you the other function. The bolt does unscrew, but let's say it's on there really tight and there's a lot of dirt and grease holding it on. I can do this by hand. You just pull this down. This holds it in place, but if I pull this down and turn it, it just unscrews. But let's say it's stuck on there. This acts as a wrench because it gives you the leverage. You see there's a little dent in it there, and you just put that together and it turns it. You take this off, just unscrew it. Very simple. All right, now look through here. That's got like a mint bore. Probably was hardly ever fired, but nice rifling mint bore. You can swap out the barrel very easily. In fact, they do make this in a 9mm conversion. I'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit. The OSS ordered about 500 or 600 of these. No wonder they ordered 500 or 600 of these. They wanted them in 9mm for a variety of reasons. Behind enemy lines, you get 9mm. It's a little bit lighter. You take the barrel off, there's a conversion kit, and they issued them to the OSS. You can take this off, folding stock, you can stick it in a duffel bag and carry it around. Nobody knows you're carrying a submachine gun in your duffel bag. So it's really easy, and actually the bolt just pops right out. I'm not going to do that, and then it screws back in. So the simplicity is just amazing. But one other feature, the biggest criticism of the M3, also M3A1. Remember I mentioned this is an A1 because it was made by Ithaca. The biggest criticism is the magazine. Here's the Thompson mag. Now obviously the military ones would have a lengthened magazine. This goes to the M3. And by the way, this does remind you of a Sten. They did model it after the Sten a little bit. I think they made a few improvements, but the Sten is also a cheap, very reliable submachine gun. This, I believe, is an improvement. After the war, a lot of third world countries picked these up from the United States. The other interesting thing, talk about the cheapness, only $20 a piece. They actually said on the front lines they didn't really make spare parts for these because if you had a problem with it, the spring broke or something happened, very little went wrong with these. But if it did, you just trade it in, turn it in, get another one at 20 bucks a piece. Who cares? So they said they needed spare parts from time to time, like a spring, but they would just basically, it was a throwaway gun and go get another one. Kind of like our modern day printers. When your printer breaks, you just throw it away and get another one. But let's go back. These are double stacked, but this is single fed. And this is not. So this is, I guess, double fed. But this is single fed. And the criticism is it's very hard to load. Now, I found out firsthand, first of all, this is the Thompson. Pops right in. No problem at all, even with gloves on. Pops right in. Just loads like any magazine that you're used to. Pops right in. But when we try to put this in, again, single fed, I'm setting them down because I actually need both hands to put in a bullet. I have to... Okay, got one in. Believe it or not, the next one is even harder. Hold on, I'm not done. Okay, I got it. Okay, that I just put 2 bullets in. So with the criticism, and it's valid, they of course could make a different magazine, but these came along. They really made the most in 1944. By 1945, they knew they had a problem, but the war was almost over. They never changed the magazine, so it was always this difficult magazine. But instead, what they have on here, gotta love this, again, American ingenuity. This is a speed loader, or it functions like a speed loader. With this speed loader, or quasi-speed loader, you just push this down, pop the bullet in, and feed it. Got it? Let's do it again. Push this down, put the bullet in, and feed it. So it's not as easy as the Thompson, but almost as easy as the Thompson with this. So this acts as a wrench, a cleaning rod, and a speed loader. If I didn't mention it already, this is of course 45 caliber, same as the Thompson, same as the Colt 1911. Rate of fire, I meant 700 to 800 rounds per minute. This one, depending on where you read, it's 350 to 450. Now the issue of accuracy, we saw the issue with the magazine, easily fixed. But they never got around to it. This was issued for the Korean War. Ithaca didn't start making this until late 45, so a few Ithacas made it into World War II in the Japanese theater, in the Pacific theater, I should say. But then they made about 30,000 of them, and most of these went to Korea. So this actually, if you notice the sling, that's a Korean era sling. From the serial number, I would say this was made after World War II. And was used in Korea. The markings, it does have Ithaca, and there is a DOD stamp and the serial number. This is in like new condition, and you saw from the bore how nice it is. Very, very reliable, sturdy weapon. Now let me say one more thing about the accuracy. So what I found in researching it, this is accurate. They say, well, the sights are for 100 yards, but they say it's most accurate at about 50 yards. Here's a guy that's shooting up some cans and bottles and things, and he said from 50 yards out and shooting an entire magazine all at once, he could hit a circle of about 6 inches. So at 50 yards, we know it's accurate. It's sighted for 100 yards, and people say, yeah, maybe you hold it at the hip and shoot it, but if you're going to aim, you can hit a target 50 to 100 yards, just to be conservative. On the Thompson, they said it's accurate at 150 yards, but again, it tends to rise up. At single shot, I don't doubt that that would be accurate. First of all, the barrel is a lot longer, which of course gives you better accuracy. But this, if you're just laying down lead, protective fire, this is a great way to spray and pray. Hey, thanks for watching. I think I'll use this for my closing shot because I just think I look really cool.